Hey everybody, welcome back to Drew's Automobile Wonders. Today I'm going to be talking about my 2009 Pontiac G8. And I've been meaning to talk about this vehicle for the longest time. I still have it. It's actually a lifetime car for me because it's gotten me through a lot. It's got me through some rough times, bad breakups. I lost my job at one point and passed, and it in the summertime, and it got me through it. Not long after I bought it either. I bought it in 2014. It had about 90,000 miles on it when I bought it, which is, people consider it high, but for those cars, it's nothing. I mean, to this day, it's nothing. This car, like I said, I consider it my most prized possession, and it's also because it's also my first hot rod, really. If you guys want to go back into my Vehicles I've Owned series, you'll see the cars that I've owned before it. I had 2 Crown Vics, and up until this car, that's pretty much all I really had my hands on, except for my 300ZX. But I didn't own that very long. So, and plus, it's not, it wasn't 360 horsepower out of the box. So, but this car, it was my first hot rod that I tinkered with. I truly took apart the motor and everything like that on it. And from my experience, this has been a hell of a car. I mean, obviously it's not the fastest thing out there. I mean, in fact, in today's standards, it's actually one of the slower. It's amazing how that works. You put work into a car, and then, a few years go by, and, it's all, there's a whole new standard out there. So, but either way, it's a fun, bound going around hot rod. I only drive it in the summer. I don't take it out in the wintertime, except for very rarely I take it out. I, keep the good in it. I drive it around the block or whatnot, shift the gears and, make sure everything's still up to par. And it doesn't mind sitting, I mean, as long as it's, it sits outside too. I meant to do more videos on it last year, 2021. But unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to get it to the drag strip like I normally do with it in the summertime. And into the fall for that matter, because for those in Michigan will know, Milan Dragway is pretty much Detroit's only quote local drag strip. And unfortunately it was shut down last year because of ownership issues and so on and so forth. Long story short, new people bought it this past fall, and they plan on reopening it this summer, so this spring, as a matter of fact. So you will definitely see more videos of the G8 in action on the track, or on a Saturday night cruising, or because I hang out on the local roads around here. We got little car shows that go on up and down our main roads here, main highways and stuff like that, restaurants and stuff. That's all pretty cool. But this car, I'm here to talk about the biggest thing I'm here to talk about is what I've done to the car and what it's done for what I expected it to do. And it did exactly what I expected it to do. I wanted a car that would run high 11s. And what I did was, this car, when I built the motor in it, I put, I did what they consider a top end build. Heads and cam swap. There's guys out there that will debate you. Oh, it's not a real build. The hell it ain't. It's a real build. Once you go beyond the bolting on, unbolting the motor, once you start tearing into the engine, it's a build. Whether you're tearing the heads off of it, the valve train, the cam, it's considered a build in my opinion, because you're tearing into the motor at that point. You got the front of the car all tore apart, or you got the engine out of the car, and you're doing all this work to it. It's considered a build at that point. Obviously, bolting an intake on is not considered a build, or me even putting headers on is not a build. I mean, in my opinion, but once you start getting elbows deep into stuff like that, to me, it's a build in my book. So for those out there who disagree, that's your opinion, but I digress. Those of you who agree, good on your part. Glad we agree. Anyways, what I did to the car is I put cam in it as well as heads. I put CNC ported GMPP heads on it that are of different. It's a different number. It's a different head number, different everything. It's actually they're actually LS3 heads. The architecture is the same way, but basically all they did was took a set of LS3 heads in their factory line and shaved the intake ports on them, and as well as the exhaust. But they ported the heads is what they did. But it's all nice, machine, professionally done. Better valve. They put better valves in it, obviously, the LS3 valves. The only thing I had to change out in the process of that was the springs. The springs, I believe, are designed to handle, they're only designed to handle like 595 lift or something like that. They can't handle much more than that. I'd have to look it up, but it might be even less than that. I think it's 580. It's not very much for those LS springs, which surprises me because I would think they'd put beefier springs in it because, GM knows their aftermarket is huge and they like seeing their customers, as far as I'm concerned, dig into their engines and build them. So, like they always have. Anyways, so I had to put different springs in it. I put BTR valve springs in it. They're designed for 660 lift. The cam itself, I have the specs laying around here, but I can never remember the stuff exactly. But it's got a Lunati Dragmaster, little Lunati Dragmaster cam in it. It's an NA cam. I mean, not that it matters. I mean, the good guy on YouTube here, Richard Holdner, confirmed that he really confirmed it, that there's really no, the motor doesn't care if it's a boost cam or an NA cam. It doesn't care. The engine doesn't care. I mean, it's kind of a gimmick. So but it was, at the time, it was for, NA applications, as they labeled it. And I put the cam in it, and I put the heads on it. And the heads, in the long process, I cleaned the top of the pistons, top of the block. I mean, I didn't open up the engine beyond the heads and the cam, pulling the cam out and pulling the heads off. And it was very clean inside. I mean, it looked brand new. Cylinder walls still had their original hone marks on them. There was nothing wrong with any of it. So I said, you know what? Put some new head gaskets on it. Clean the top of the pistons. Just wipe anything that's got, carbon buildup on it. And it all came right off. It didn't take much at all. There wasn't hardly any buildup on there to begin with. Now, when I did the build, the car had 130,000 miles on it when I did the build. In fact, actually, I think it was 140. 135. Somewhere around that. It was over 130,000 miles. And when I did when I opened the motor up, I was impressed with how clean everything was inside, including the valve train and the old heads and stuff like that. And the old heads, which I believe are 821 heads, if I remember correctly, those are also rec port heads, which I'm going to get into a video later on in deciphering the heads and the numbers and all the engines they went on and whatnot. Just a brief summary of everything to look for on if you're to build an LS. It's kind of there's a guy on here that did I forget his channel handle, but he did a small block Chevy head best to worst. I want to do an LS head best to worst, just from my take on things and from my experience and what I've witnessed over the years. So with that, I took the 821 heads off and I put GMPP CNC ported LS3 heads on it. And I wanted those heads because I could have sent the stock. There was nothing wrong with the stock heads. And they were rec port heads just like the GMPP heads are. LS3 heads. The thing is, I just wanted a fresh top end on the motor. I had 130,000 miles on it, so why not? And for the money, these heads flow extremely well. I paid $1,500 for the set of the heads, And to put it in perspective, the AFR heads that you're splitting hairs on on the flow rate on those heads are about double that. You know, about $1,000 more to double that, depending on where you look. Probably definitely double that now. It was less than that back then, but it's definitely more than double that now. Granted, the GMPP heads have probably gone up in price, especially since they put a new. I noticed they changed the number on the heads, so I'm wondering if they. I haven't really researched it yet, but I'm wondering if they tweak those heads a little bit, maybe put different springs in them or something like that. Because now the heads have a different number, which tells me they did some sort of redesigning to the head. I mean, unless they just changed the number on it because they were bored or something. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of weird to me. But anyways, the heads I have, they no longer make. And they make these different heads with different number, which I'd have to look up. I mean, they make all sorts of aftermarket. These aftermarket heads all come with, you know, numbers on them. But I don't really keep up on those. I just look up the part numbers and stuff like that, and you know, and I know what I'm looking at when I get it. So anyways, AFR heads are, in my opinion, a waste of time for a build on an LS, especially a build like this. I mean, unless you're looking to shave off, you know, you're looking for that extra 5-10 horsepower. When you're doing a build for less than $5,000. I mean, to me, it's just kind of a waste of time on these engines, in my opinion. Now, if you're building a small block Chevy, yeah, AFR makes some, you know, good shit for them. You know, small block Fords, all the old school stuff and the big block stuff, AFR makes great stuff for. But unfortunately, in the LS applications, the way the amount of flow those heads, any of these heads make, is light years better than anything old school. I mean, in terms of the small block Chevy, maybe not so much the big block, obviously, but the big block has big heads on it. You know, they've always had big flow rate because they're big displacement. So, but anyways, I'm getting sidetracked here. I put it all together. It took me about 5 months to do it. And then this is back when I had a tuner for my car. Great guy by the name of Mike Darren. Great guy. We hung out a couple G8 meets and stuff like that in the past, and he decided to open up his own shop out in Novi. It was called MJD Performance, and he did pretty much everything to my car in terms of tuning it. He also, the only thing I had not done myself, and I had him do it, because he's the only guy I would trust to do it at the time, was put my stall in, because I also had a 3200 stall that I ordered for the car, which is borderline good for that cam. That cam it's a very aggressive cam. In fact, you know what? I'm gonna put the cam specs in the description, and I'll put the head number too. I'm gonna go look, make sure, you know, just to verify what the numbers were, because it's been so long since I've looked at the specs. I mean, I just I'm lazy, you know. I don't really, you know, I'm always doing something new, especially with the project I got going on out there right now with this LY6 swap I'm doing in my 89 Chevy Suburban, or GMC Suburban rather. Obviously I'm distracted, so I have to look at the specs. I mean, I don't really keep them in my head. But I do keep the part numbers and, you know, the code names for, you know, stuff like that. So, I mean, that's kind of all I've always used. Anyways, with that said, I had him do a trans maintenance, you know, fluid flush in the process, obviously, and I had him put the stall in. It only cost me, what did it cost me extra? It only cost me like $800 or something like that. It was nothing wild. He charged pretty good for being, you know, a tuner. You know, usually tuners, they upcharge for that stuff, because, you know, I mean, they're doing, you know, they want, you know, typically a customer wants precision when they go to a tuner and have their hot rod worked on. So, and that's all right. You know, nothing against people that send their stuff out and have it built. But um, anyway, so I got that all taken care of. Then he decided to dyno tune it for me. I was like, sure, go ahead. You know, I'll throw you another, you know, a couple $100 or whatnot. You know, whatever it costs. You know, I'd like to have it. I'd love to have a dyno tune. So he did that for me, and it made 456 horsepower at the wheel and 430 pound-feet of torque at the wheel. And I was like, wow, holy crap! You know, just a cam and some ported heads. You know, there's no rotating, no new rotating assembly, no punching the block out, no trying to gain displays, no stroking it, nothing like that. This is just messing with a stock 6-liter block, and it's NA, and the parts I'm using are considered budget parts, but not really. I mean, you know, I really spared no expense on that car going through it through the years with, you know, performance stuff. I'll get to that in a minute. But I was like, wow, that was pretty impressive. So he finally, you know, buttoned the car up and sent me on my way. I went out there and I picked it up. I actually had it hauled out there with my AAA Gold. I considered it broke down. But I had it hauled out there because it ran. When we went to start it, it barely ran. And I remember my pop was trying to start it, and he was freaking out because it wouldn't start. You know, and I'm like, hold on, this tune is not for this application, obviously, so it doesn't know what it's doing. The ECM is very confused right now. So what I did is I started it. I turned the key and gave it a little bit of gas just to let air in as it was pumping, and it just barely ran. I was like, all right, leave it alone, because it just barely ran. So we took it down the street here right quick, just, you know, and I had to stay in the gas because the vacuum just would shut it right off. So I had to, you need to say I wasn't about to drive it from here in Dearborn all the way out to Novi. For those who don't know, that's like a 40-minute trip from here to Novi. I wasn't about to do that, especially in that traffic that day. So I had a rollback come and grab my car, and we hauled it out there, and Mike tuned it and, you know, sent me on my way. He dynoed it and everything. He actually sent me messages as he was doing it, and I'm like, dude, you're doing great, man. I mean, that guy, he was awesome at what he does, and he still is to this day. Unfortunately, he closed the shop down and actually merged with Vector, which is out in Clinton Township. I had an experience with those guys, but I wasn't a huge fan of them. On the contrary, though, I mean, him bringing his magic there probably made him a lot better, but it's just my opinion. I wasn't very satisfied with their tuning, because I had them tune my car briefly when I just put a cold air kit and an axle back on my car at the time. And then Mike opened up his own shop, and then I had him start doing my stuff, tuning-wise. So along with the heads and cam, obviously, I mean, I spared no expense on the exhaust. Kooks headers, Kooks X pipe, Pypes axle back, and I guess you could say I did spare a little expense, because that axle back, you know, I do my research, you know, I go on YouTube, look for exhaust clips and stuff like that, and I'm like, all right, what's the Pypes exhaust sound like? I'm just curious, because the biggest reason I want them, because they had black exhaust tips that are kind of an ovally shape. They're powder coated. And I'm like, man, that would look great on the back of the G8. And it'd be the only thing that somewhat shows that anything's done to the car, unless you hear it running. Many pictures, it looks stock still. But I wanted to get the Pypes axle back because of those tips. And so I listened, I liked the tone, and I ordered those axle backs, and I put them on in the midst of putting the heads and cam in before I sent it out to have it tuned. And lo and behold, I'm like, wow, for $300, you couldn't do any better. It has tiny little, you know, turbo style mufflers on it, and it's all stainless. And I'm like, man, this axle back's perfect. And the best part about that axle back is, with all that's done to the car, the tone going down the freeway, the most drone you hear is going about 40 to 45 miles an hour. That's when it gets borderline annoying. I mean, I can understand, especially the older guys, you know, they don't like drone and stuff. And when they ride in my car, they're like, you know, all it takes is that one little bit too much for them to say something. And I had something said to me about going 40, 45 miles an hour down one of these roads around here. And I'm like, yeah, I guess you're right. But at least my biggest concern was taking it out on the freeway. And on the freeway, you hear it subtly, but you wouldn't know, if you didn't know anything about GM stuff and you didn't know anything done to the car at all or anything like, you know, nothing about cars. You get in that car as an everyday person and be like, you sure something's done to the car? It sounds stock to me. You know, when you're going, you know, 70, 75 miles an hour down the freeway, because it's very nice and subtle. I mean, you can hear it. When you know what's done to the car, you can hear it. But that's what I wanted. I wanted that nice, organized exhaust tone. And when it's idling at a stoplight or whatnot, it's organized. It's not obnoxious. And when you take off, when you launch it, it's not obnoxious. You got guys around here, especially around here, that just cut the exhaust off their cars and they just drive around and it's obnoxious. And I'm guilty of that myself, because there was a time when I did that once. I straight piped the G8, and this was only for a few weeks. And I took it to a car show or two, and I drove it to work and back a couple times, and I'm like, I'm done with this. I mean, it was actually shortly after I had my Kooks exhaust. I had a straight pipe loudmouth SLP axle back on it, and I did not like it one bit. It was obnoxious. I liked it at first. It sounded great at first, but especially with no cam, it was all stock cam at the time, you know, everything. It was just a bolt-on car, you know, just some exhaust work, and of which we did ourselves. It was a pain in the ass, but we did it. Anyways, it just had a cold air kit and a tune, and I'm like, dude, this is done. We're done. I ended up putting the stock mufflers back on it up until I did the heads and the cam on it, as a matter of fact. So there was that. So with that, I guess everybody kind of goes through that phase, but at the end of the day, an obnoxious exhaust tone is horrible, especially when it does nothing performance-wise to the car. In fact, it makes things worse. So with that said, I wanted to make sure my G8 sounded great, idling, launching when you get on it, but when you're not doing that when you're not getting crazy with it, it sounds good. It sounds organized. It sounds subtle. It's, you know, it's like a calm before the storm, you know. And that's exactly what I got with that exhaust setup on it. And I'm like, perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for. So I take it to the drag strip. Anyways, I get everything done. I take it to the drag strip, and it runs. The first time out of the gate, I ran like a 1220. I'm like, shit. Like, great. This thing's not up to par like I want it to. And I got drag radials on it too. However, I still have the stock 19s on it on the front. All in all, what was done to the car besides the tires was it had, let's go through things again here. Had a Volant cold air kit on it, which wasn't the greatest. Now I'll get to that in a second. Had Kooks exhaust with a Pypes axle back. Has the little Lunati Dragmaster RCR Rick Crawford racing cam in it. And it's got GMPP CNC ported LS3 heads on it. So heads and cam G8, and it's got 3200 stall. And I also, between first tinkering with it, when I got the drag radials for it, I actually ended up putting a 345 Camaro rear end in it as well. I forgot to mention that. So with it running with the Camaro differential, the radials, and the basic bolt-on stuff, the Volant intake, Kooks exhaust, and the tune, it ran 1290s. It was a 1290s car all day long. 13.0 on a bad day, 13.1 maybe-ish. But 1290s, it would run 1290s, you know, quite a bit. And it ran okay. I mean, I was I was okay with that, you know, especially with being a high miles car and a daily driver at the time, you know, and still kind of is in the summertime. I drive to work. But, you know, I was like, all right, it's time to do some more serious stuff to this car. So then I went through it, did the heads, the cam, and the 3200 stall, and the radials and everything. Everything else I left alone pretty much, except for the axle back, and it doesn't make any difference. It's just the tone. I went out. It was fall. I think it was late September. It was a nice, cool 58-degree night. 50-degree. No, it was colder than that. It was like 55 out. Late September. I went out. I ran a 12-1 my first pass. I ran a couple more passes, 12-1s. I'm like, great, this is where it's consistent, you know. So I run my second to my last pass of the night. I run a 12-0. And I'm coming back up the idle lane, and I'm telling myself in the car, almost out loud, I said to myself, I go, here's the thing. It's getting into the 11s tonight. So I make one more, and they said, this is the last round for the night, you know, because they were closing. So I gave it a hell of a nice, I cooked the tires up nice and perfect. I must have, because then I went to line it up, the good lane, my favorite lane to run. I know that's debatable between a lot of other guys, but the right lane is my lane. I love that lane. I've always had good luck with it at Milan. I did a great launch. Come back up, get the ticket, 1190. 11,987, I believe it was. Yeah, 11,9, yeah. I'm like, beautiful. I mean, I crisped the, I did exactly what I wanted it to do. After I was done building it and putting it together with Pop, I wanted to get into the 11s. So I did. This is a build I encourage to a lot of people who want a dailyable car. Because now let's get into the drivability of this car. Let me just say, this car is very drivable. I mean, you feel it. I mean, at the stoplights, it ruts just a little bit because of the stall. Like I said, it's a borderline drivable stall. But, you know, you push the brake hard enough, it still idles fine. It doesn't want to stall out. It doesn't want to do any of that crazy stuff. And when you go down the freeway, like I said with the exhaust, it's perfect. I mean, it is a perfect world. And when you want to get on it, it sounds great. I mean, the sound of it, you know, I mean, it'll make you feel great that you accomplished something. This car, I also want to say the gas mileage on it, and not that I give any crap about that gas mileage on that car at this point. I mean, it's my hot rod. So, but just to put it in perspective and to throw it out there, it's either really, really bad or it's relatively decent, depending on how you drive it. If you drive it 55 to even freeway speeds, best gas mileage, obviously, about 55, 60 miles an hour. I have gotten the same gas mileage I got when it was stock with the displacement on demand. For those who don't know, the G8 GTs had displacement on demand with their 6 liters. It's a big goofy system, which I forgot to mention. I ended up deleting at the process of all the cam swap and the heads and stuff, obviously. It's all a bunch of junk, you know, spring-loaded lifters and all that crap. You want all of that out of there. Throw that all away. All the solenoids and the valley cover and everything. Throw that all away. Anyways, I did the delete. And even with, you know, all cylinders firing all the time now, because, you know, like I said, it's a completely different car. I'm happy to say I don't know how I pull it off, but I get 27 to 28 miles to the gallon. If I'm driving like grandma, I'm getting 27 to 28 miles to the gallon on like a 2-lane highway. I'm like, holy crap, because that's what I was getting with it stock. Grandmaing it, granted. I mean, you know, you gotta really, you know, you gotta pretend there's an egg between you and that gas pedal when you drive it to get that kind of gas mileage. But even if you don't, if you drive like an average person does, you can still get 23 to 25 miles to the gallon out of that car on a 2-lane highway like that, minimum. On the freeway, I still get 22, 21, between 21 and 23. Like I said, depending on how I drive. If I drive it like grandma, I put the cruise control on. That kind of plays a factor. I use cruise control a lot on that car still. I get 22, 23 miles to the gallon on the highway with it. And I was like, and the car makes, 500 horsepower at the crank, and, I'm like, wow, for a car that, we put together, I put together, myself in the garage in the winter, cold garage in the winter with the torpedo heater with Pop. I had a little help from my we do a lot of father-son stuff, and I'll get to that, later on here. But we busted our asses putting that motor together, and it did exactly everything we wanted it to do. Plus, it still gets reasonable gas mileage. There's the bonus. I love the car. I kind of want to leave it alone because I'd thought about boosting it eventually. I was like, you know what? Nah, I'm going to leave it alone for now. At least for now. I might get a bug up my ass on down the road to do something more serious to it. But for now, it's perfect the way it is. I mean, it does everything I want it to do. It's a 4,100 pound car with me in it. And the fact that it can run 1190 with just shelf parts. And mind you, the car now has 150,000 miles on it. And it can still run that. I have a time slip right there. And it was actually my better times. One of my better 1190s, 11,983 at 114. And with the mile per hour, I know that it's still got, I think it's got a little bit more in it yet. I have buddies, some of my best friends telling me, they're like, dude, I bet you could run 1160 on the right day. I'm like, I don't know about that. I mean, that's pushing it. Maybe an 1180. I mean, I don't know. I haven't done it yet. However, last winter, not this winter, but last winter, I ended up finally putting the VCM ram air intake on my car, which is a huge gulp intake that's designed in Australia for the Holdens, because the G8 is a Holden Commodore. But these guys down there, these performance guys down there, they developed and designed this airbox that is a perfect, almost a perfect ram air for the front of this thing. It goes over the radiator, and the gulp on it's huge. There's another ram air out there. I can't remember the name of it right now because I'm just drawing a blank. But it's airbox Veraram. I think it's called a Veraram. Yep. The Veraram was always the go-to ram air intake if you wanted it for your G8, or I think they make the ram air for the I think they make a ram air box for the F bodies as well. But their box is about that big. The just their intake side of it. The VCM intake is like that. I mean, it's huge. So that's why I bought it. I paid good money for it. And once again, I did my research. I watched dyno videos. These guys running these cars on the dynos, and you actually have to, you have to convert, their kilowatts and stuff like that, because they're in the land down under down there. But their numbers that they were pulling without a tune alone was impressive. I'm like, I never knew an airbox could do such a thing. I'm like, these air intakes are always gimmicks and stuff like that. But when you watch them physically put the intake on, they take the stock intake off, put this intake on, or whatever bullshit intake they had before that, and they put this intake on. They put it on the dyno after, and they're like, here's your numbers. I'm like, wow, that's impressive. So, yeah, kudos to VCM. They make, and they also make, it's a nice clean cut intake too. If you want the, I ended up taking my pieces, the plastic pieces out, but they make little inserts that go on the sides that cover up, you know, big holes and stuff like that. You know, that you had where your old air box was. Goes around your washer filler and your, you know, your coolant filler and stuff like that. It makes it look clean cut basically, but I'm not looking for a clean cut engine bay. I look for a clean engine bay. You know, it's cleaner, you know, I don't want dust everywhere when I'm working on shit, but I also want a nice, reasonable, presentable engine bay that says there's work done to this car. I work on the stuff. I don't want any tedious crap in the way, but I want it decent looking inside, you know, under the hood. So anyways, beside that, I have yet to run it with this intake on it, so I'm curious to know what's going to happen. If it's worth a tenth or something, like something crazy stupid like that, you know, that would be silly. I mean, it would be so silly to have an intake alone pick you up a tenth on the drag strip or something like that, or 2/10. It's like, but I'll believe that when I see it, because I have yet to see an intake do that. So did I waste my money or didn't I? You know, either way, the car does. I mean, you put your foot down, you do feel it. You feel a little bit of a difference, especially with, and obviously with more that's done to the car, you know, like the heads and the cam and stuff, the more an intake works for that engine, the more what am I looking for here word wise, the more productive it is, because it's swallowing more air because the engine is asking for more air. You're looking to cram more air into that engine. I mean, the engine is essentially a giant air compressor. The more air you can cram into it there, the better it's going to run, and the more efficient you can run the air through the engine, the better it's going to run. And that's why the camshafts and so on and so forth. Yeah, I'm curious to know what it will run, because and then that's, you know, like the second or third time I ran 1190 with it, and it's a but the drivability on it for being able to do stuff like that. I mean, I can drive that car from here to, and I've taken it on road trips. I've taken it down to North Carolina. I've taken it to Watkins Glen, New York. I mean, I could take that car to Florida and back on cruise control with what's done to it, and I can run 1190s with the drag strip, with it, you know, and then drive home with the air conditioning on. That's what I want. I want a car that's, you know, nice, drivable, but still gets up and gets pretty good. Like I said, it's not a single digit car. It's not a 10-second car. It's not even a low 11s car. Not even a mid 11s car. But it's a car that's quick, relatively quick, that you can go out and have a good time with. I go out and I have a good time with it to this day. I should mention also with this car, it does have BMR sway bars on it. I used to, it's a little side story, it didn't really happen very much compared to what's done to it now. I definitely don't do this now. I used to track it. I took it for a few track days in HPD, a few HPD days. I ran it at Gingerman, Mid-Ohio, places like that. And, I mean, the car was a tank. I mean, so I ended up putting Hawk pads on it and BMR sway bars. And I would run, you know, Carfest and stuff like that with it. And the thing about it is those two things alone, that's all I really had to do to the car. Other than I had a set of V6 Camaro Steely wheels that I had for it with track tires on it. But other than that, that's all I had. I mean, that's all I did to the car. And it handled so much better. And to this day, it still handles better because I still got the stuff on it, and it stops better. I decided to leave all that stuff alone, even though I don't take it on a road course anymore, obviously. Obviously, because I'm a road, you know, I have dedicated road race cars now, you know, or road race car. My Porsche, which, you know, you guys have seen some of my video footage on my channel, you'll see it. But Anyways, the only other thing I have done to the car is I add to the drag wheel package that I have for it. I have GTO spare aluminum wheels on front runners, skinnies on the front. So we're gonna see if they make a difference too. So far they haven't. They have. I've taken them to the drag strip plenty of times now, and I still have yet to beat that 1190 83. So, like, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. Like I said, I'm happy with it the way it is right now. So, any numbers better than that, we'll be better off for it. So, anyways, so I'm gonna conclude this video, and that's basically a brief story on my Pontiac G8. So, see you guys around. Like I said, got more videos to come here. I'm going to talk about LS cylinder heads, the best to the worst. Plenty to talk about there, so hopefully it helps people out. You know, that's all I'm here for. Got any questions? Any questions about the G8? Feel free to ask. Like I said, I know I missed some numbers. I mean, they're not in my head right now, so I'm going to post them in the description. Anyways, take care, everybody.